Okay, let's unpack this. There is this milestone in life that we have zero greeting cards for,
Yeah, none at all.
right? And absolutely no roadmap for it either.
Yeah.
But it is arguably, well, it's probably the single most exhausting task a human being can undertake.
Oh, without a doubt.
It's this experience that just alters the fundamental architecture of who you are. But because it's so deeply uncomfortable to talk about, we've basically collectively agreed to just hide it in the shadows.
Right. I mean, it is much easier to just look away until the very moment it arrives at your front door. Confronting it before you have to feels, I don't know, like inviting in bad weather.
Which is exactly why we are taking a deep dive today into this really striking 2022 essay by an author named Chu Feng. It's titled, Why No Filial Child by a Long-Suffering Patient's Sickbed.
It's a heavy title.
It really is. And our mission today is to unpack this central, undeniable premise laid out in the text, which is that caring for someone who is long-term ill drains a human being both in body and mind more completely than almost anything else.
Yeah, the author draws this really sharp line between short-term care and long-term care.
Right, because short-term care, most of us can bear that with, a bit of grit.
Exactly, you push through it. But spending years tending to a bedridden patient, that wears a person down to their absolute foundation. And what's fascinating here is that for anyone listening right now who might be a caregiver, or maybe you're watching a parent age and feeling that creeping anxiety about what comes next.
That dread, yeah.
Right, that dread. This text does something incredibly rare. It validates that bone-deep exhaustion without a single ounce of judgment.
Wow, yeah.
I mean, it completely bypasses the usual guilt trips society places on caregiving. And even better, it promises that we don't just have to sit in the misery of it.
Which is a relief.
Truly, the author actually proposes this radical structural solution that completely rethinks how we navigate human frailty.
Okay, but to understand that solution, I feel like we have to figure out how we ended up so trapped in the first place, right?
Oh, absolutely. We have to look at the history.
Yeah. So the title of the essay references an old proverb, no filial child by a long-suffering patient's sickbed. And the historical implication there is that eventually, if an illness drags on for years, even the most devoted child will fail to show proper devotion.
They'll just grow distant or frustrated.
Exactly. But the text argues the root of this failure isn't a lack of love. It's actually modern economic reality.
Yeah, the author points to the industrial era as the catalyst for this whole crisis.
Which seems counterintuitive, right?
Right, because we tend to operate under the assumption that technological progress makes life easier. I mean, we have automation, we have instant communication.
We should theoretically have way more leisure time than our ancestors.
But the text observes that the exact opposite has happened. Each successive generation is actually more burdened than the last.
It is the great paradox of modern life. The more advanced our tools become, the higher the baseline cost of living climbs. And the treadmill just moves faster and faster.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Right. Young and middle-aged people today are running at absolute maximum capacity just to maintain basic survival. And the text gives this terrifyingly relatable metric for this pressure.
Oh, the time off metric, yes.
Yeah, it notes that missing work for just 3 days is enough to spark serious anxiety. Taking 3 months off?
That invites catastrophe.
Total catastrophe.
Yeah.
Your career, your livelihood, your ability to keep a roof over your own head is just instantly jeopardized.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, before industrialization, human beings largely lived in multi-generational agrarian settings.
Right, on farms, big family.
Exactly. The burden of survival and the burden of caregiving, they were shared across a wide network of extended family living in really close proximity.
But modern industrial capitalism fractured that network.
It did. It isolated the nuclear family and tied survival directly to wage labor. You have to sell your time to survive.
It makes me think of the sheer mechanics of it. It's like trying to run a marathon while someone is continuously adding heavy bricks into your backpack.
That is a perfect analogy.
You might have the willpower to finish the race. You deeply, genuinely want to cross the finish line for the person you are caring for. But the math of the weight in the backpack versus your actual biological energy.
It makes collapse an absolute certainty.
Yeah.
And that's the core dynamic here. Society is incredibly quick to judge caregivers when they begin to appear indifferent or sluggish.
Oh, for sure. We view it as a moral failing.
Right. People whisper about how cold someone is being to their sick parent, but the author is forcing us to look at the math.
The brutal math.
Yeah. After an exhausting day of wage labor a day where missing 3 shifts might mean eviction, Literally, that person has to go home and essentially start a second shift.
A physically demanding, emotionally draining shift tending to a bedridden loved one.
Exactly. So the sluggishness isn't a lack of filial piety or love. It is the pure mathematical result of being overwhelmed by modern survival.
And because the caregiver is economically trapped, that unbearable pressure doesn't just evaporate, right? It leaks directly into the bedroom.
It poisons everything.
It really does. It poisons the intimate day-to-day relationship between the caregiver and the patient. And the text broadens the scope here in a way that I think is really vital to recognize.
Because it's not just parents and kids.
Right. This dynamic isn't limited to adult children caring for elderly parents.
No, the math applies to everyone. It applies to spouses caring for their partners, siblings caring for siblings, or, friends stepping in for friends.
The baseline of a modern adult's life is already set at maximum capacity.
We're all just tired.
People are utterly exhausted just managing their own daily logistics. To suddenly mandate that they carve out the massive amounts of time and energy required to keep another human being alive, clean, and comfortable.
It pushes the human nervous system to a breaking point.
Let's look at the patient's side of this silent struggle too, as described in the text, because it is a deeply human, deeply uncomfortable reality.
It's hard to talk about.
Very. Bedridden patients are often in pain, they've lost their autonomy, they are trapped in failing bodies, entirely reliant on someone else for their most basic dignities.
Which is terrifying.
And the author notes that, understandably, they can become irritable or stubborn. If their needs aren't met exactly as they wish, or as quickly as they wish, they might respond with frustration, complaints, or resentment.
Right. Just put yourself in the room where this is happening. The caregiver is terrified of losing their job, they're severely sleep deprived, and burning the candle at both ends.
Just hanging on by a thread.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the patient, who is suffering immensely in their own right, snaps at the caregiver because, say, a meal is late or a pillow wasn't fluffed correctly.
It creates this completely suffocating environment.
It really does.
And the text highlights a terrible dilemma here. The caregiver is basically trapped in a behavioral straitjacket.
What do you mean?
Well, you cannot vent your frustration on the sick. Society, and honestly your own conscience, dictates that you must be the strong one.
Right, you can't yell at someone who is bedridden.
You can't even afford to show impatience. So what do? You swallow it. And the author writes that this breeds this is a quote, deep unspoken sorrow and helplessness. You just pack it down day after day.
Which creates a psychological pressure cooker with zero release valve. And this brings us to a really fascinating piece of advice the author gives directly to the patients themselves.
Oh, this part, yeah.
The text argues that patients absolutely must show gratitude and tolerance to their caregivers, even if those caregivers are their own children.
Okay, wait. I have to admit, I really struggled with this part of the reading.
I'm not surprised. It's a tough pill to swallow.
I found myself really pushing back against the author's logic here. The text says patients must actively express this gratitude, otherwise the caregivers will lose patience and confidence. But isn't it a bit harsh?
Harsho.
To demand that someone who is physically suffering, who has lost their autonomy, be the one responsible for managing the healthy person's emotional state. Shouldn't the healthy person be the bigger person?
I hear you. It sounds totally counterintuitive, and it is entirely natural to resist that idea. It feels a bit like we are blaming the victim.
Exactly.
But we have to look closely at the underlying mechanics the author is describing. The author isn't making a moral judgment about who has it worse. They are making a pragmatic observation about human endurance.
Okay.
When a caregiver's physical energy is entirely depleted, what keeps them walking back into that bedroom? What prevents that unspoken sorrow you mentioned from curdling into bitter resentment?
So you were saying the gratitude isn't about, feeding the caregiver's ego. It's a functional requirement?
Yes. It is the only social lubricant left when the physical energy is gone.
Wow. Okay.
The patient is suffering physical pain, absolutely, but the caregiver is enduring profound psychological and physical depletion. If the patient only offers complaints and resentment, the caregiver's human nature will eventually override their willpower.
Their patience will just break.
It has to.
Yeah.
The author is advising patients to use gratitude as a survival mechanism for the caregiving relationship itself.
That makes the stakes incredibly clear. It is about the literal mechanics of keeping a human connection alive under impossible stress.
Exactly.
But, that introduces a huge problem. If biology and exhaustion dictate our behavior so completely, what happens to our values?
Ah.
Why can't we just rely on traditional ethics? Why can't the sheer desire to, quote-unquote, do the right thing sustain a caregiver through the darkest days?
This raises an important question, and the author delivers a blunt, almost chilling conclusion on that front. Human nature, when pushed to the absolute brink of exhaustion, cannot be solved by moral preaching.
It's so bleak, but so real. The essay is so specific about this, too, and it really takes aim at the very philosophical foundations of society.
Specifically Eastern philosophy, right?
Yeah, for thousands of years, virtues like filial piety were the absolute bedrock of societal order. You cared for your ancestors, full stop.
No questions asked.
Right. The text explicitly lists the pillars of traditional moral thought. It mentions benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trustworthiness.
Those are heavy virtues to live up to.
Very heavy. And the author suggests that modern industrial capitalism has fundamentally broken that 2,000-year-old framework.
It is a profound philosophical challenge. The author is basically drawing a hard line between the limits of philosophy and the limits of biology.
Right, because philosophy doesn't pay the rent.
Exactly. These virtues are beautiful, and they function really well as guiding principles when a society is stable and individuals actually have breathing room.
That we don't.
Right. When a person is fundamentally, physically, and mentally exhausted, no amount of moral persuasion or coercion makes a significant difference.
So you are saying you cannot out-virtue total burnout.
You simply cannot. You can lecture a burnt-out caregiver on righteousness and propriety all day long.
Society can guilt-trip them with expectations of filial piety.
But if their body and mind are broken by the sheer volume of tasks required to sustain a modern life while providing 24/7 care, the moral preaching is basically just background noise.
It does not change the material reality of their exhaustion.
Not one bit.
So, if biology beats morality, and if the nuclear family is economically tapped out, what is left? I mean, we can't just abandon people when they get sick. If preaching fails, we need something tangible.
Well, the author arrives at the same conclusion. If the current system is fundamentally incompatible with the realities of long-term illness, the solution cannot be an emotional one.
Okay.
And it cannot be a moral one. It has to be a structural one. The text argues we need a fundamental transformation of both production and living.
Here is where it gets really interesting, because if the isolated family is a failed model for this crisis, what is the alternative?
Right.
The text introduces a concept from an initiative called Lifechanyuan, specifically a program called The Second Home.
Right. So Lifechanyuan is essentially a community and philosophical movement that advocates for a completely non-traditional way of living.
Right.
And the second home is their proposed model for society. It's important to note it is not just a nursing home or a medical facility.
So it's bigger than that.
Much bigger. It is an entirely new program of production and lifestyle designed specifically to neutralize the industrial squeeze we talked about earlier.
But how does that actually work mechanically? Like, how do you neutralize the fact that people still have to pay rent and buy groceries?
Well, the second home works by decoupling survival from the traditional 9-to-5 wage labor system.
Interesting.
It relies on pooling resources and living communally so that the individual is no longer an isolated economic island. And because the community's resources are pooled, the mechanics of caregiving can be entirely transformed.
Because everyone is pitching in.
Yes. In the second home, the sick receive proper care through regularly rotated caregivers.
That is the paradigm shift right there.
It changes everything.
Because in our current society, tending to a bedridden parent is the sole isolated responsibility of their children or their immediate spouse. You are on an island.
And if you fall, the patient falls.
Exactly. But in the second home, that model is totally shattered. Caregiving is no longer solely the responsibility of the blood relatives. It becomes a shared duty among all members of the community.
Which completely rewrites the mathematical equation of exhaustion.
Right.
By distributing the caregiving responsibilities across a much wider pool of people, you are ensuring that no single individual is subjected to that soul-crushing, years-long grind.
So someone might just do a shift and then go back to their life.
Basically, a person might care for the sick for a designated period, and then they rotate out, returning to other tasks within the community while someone else rotates in.
I keep thinking about this in terms of sports.
Oh, how so?
The traditional model we live in now, the isolated nuclear family, is like a solo endurance sport. You are out there running an ultramarathon all by yourself with those heavy bricks in your backpack.
Oh, right, the bricks.
And eventually the athlete collapses from dehydration and fatigue. There's no other outcome. It is literally just a matter of when. But the second home model the author describes is like a relay race.
A relay race, yes, that perfectly captures the mechanics of it.
Because you run your sprint, you give it your absolute all. And because you know your shift is limited, you can actually be present.
You can be a good caregiver.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can provide excellent, compassionate care. You can be patient when the sick person is irritable. But then, before your biology breaks, before you build up that deep, unspoken sorrow, you pass the baton.
You hand it off.
Passing the baton prevents the burden from crushing any single individual. The text emphasizes that this structural shift significantly eases psychological stress, mental exhaustion, and those profound feelings of helplessness.
Right, because the helplessness in our current system comes from looking down the tunnel of the future and seeing absolutely no end to the demands being placed on you.
It's just an endless dark tunnel.
But when care is a shared duty among a broad community like the second home, the fear of the future dissipates. You are freed from the burdens of constant worry, just as the text promises, because the community acts as a massive shock absorber for the crises of human frailty.
It is a total reimagining of how we owe each other care.
Right.
We are shifting from rigid, guilt-driven familial obligation that eventually breaks us.
To structured, rotated community support that sustains us.
And the author makes it very clear that this isn't just an abstract philosophical exercise to debate in a classroom.
No, it is highly practical and incredibly urgent.
Which brings us entirely back to you, the listener. Why should you care about a 2022 essay proposing a radical communal lifestyle?
It's a fair question.
Because the author issues a very stark warning. Illness and caregiving are challenges that every single one of us will face sooner or later.
It is inescapable.
You will either need care or you will be called upon to give it. In all likelihood, you will experience both sides of that sickbed.
It is the one absolute guarantee in the human experience. And the author's final advice in the text is actually a call to action.
What do they recommend?
They urge the reader to plan ahead. It is wise to transition into a new way of life, this community-oriented shared burden model, before exhaustion and helplessness take over.
The warning is so visceral, like, do not wait until you are already drowning. Do not wait until you are the exhausted caregiver snapping at your loved one, or the bedridden patient feeling like a horrific burden to your children.
Because by then, it's too late.
Right. The text says that by the time exhaustion and helplessness fully take over, regret will be of no use. You have to build the lifeboat while the water is still calm.
It requires a massive, proactive shift in how we view our futures. I mean, think about it. We spend decades planning our financial retirements, meticulously organizing our 401ks and pensions.
But we spend almost zero time planning our caregiving infrastructure.
Exactly. The author is challenging us to recognize that our current societal infrastructure is mathematically designed to fail us when we are at our most vulnerable.
We started today by examining the harsh reality of the industrial squeeze and how society forces us to survive a punishing economic system while simultaneously demanding endless, isolated care for our sick loved ones.
It's a rigged game.
It really is. We explored how this impossible math breeds resentment in the bedroom, how traditional moral preaching fails to change the biological reality of burnout.
And how a structural solution like the shared, rotated duty of the second home might be the only viable way out.
But as you go about your day, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We have built our entire modern world around the idolization of the self-sufficient, independent nuclear family.
Right.
But we are currently watching a massive global decline in birth rates, and extended families are shrinking into non-existence.
It's a huge demographic shift.
So if cumul care is the only mathematically viable way to survive the crushing weight of long-term illness, how will this demographic collapse force our hand? If we simply do not have enough children left to even attempt the solo marathon of caregiving, will society be forced to adopt a shared model like the second home, not out of philosophical enlightenment, but out of sheer, undeniable demographic necessity?
Honestly, when the math of the isolated family finally breaks down completely, community might be the only lifeboat left.
It is a reality we all need to prepare for. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Keep questioning the structures around you, keep looking out for each other, and keep learning. We'll catch you next time.